everybody, it's Allison. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am really excited today because I am guest designing for Picket Fence Studios for the month of March, and we are celebrating the March release today. This is a really amazing release. There are so many magical and fanciful products in this release, so I think you're really going to love it. We are going to start with this die set. This is called the More Fanciful Feathers die set, and I die cut each one with some Canson XL watercolor paper because I am going to be using my Lindy's Magicals today. And actually, I filmed this part a few weeks ago. If you watched my video from a few weeks ago on the Lindy's Magicals, I made these feathers at the same time. So these magicals that I'm using are part of the Tea and Crumpets set from Lindy's gang. And first I'm going to sprinkle some of the magicals directly onto the feather. And again, this is cut from watercolor paper. And then I'm just going to spray it with water. And what I love about these feathers, and pardon my voice, I don't know if I'm coming down with something, but what I love about these feathers is when they get wet, and you can see me kind of shaping it. When they get wet, you can kind of, I don't know, they get this just amazing dimension and movement to them, just like an actual feather. Now, normally when I work with magicals and my watercolor paper gets wet, and then I set it aside to dry, I try to flatten it before it dries, but here you can see I'm really embracing the shape of the feather and kind of making it even less flat. All right, so this time you can see I have some leftover magicals in this is actually a plastic container that you see, and I have some leftover magicals at the bottom, and I'm just kind of soaking it up with that other feather. So there's several ways that you can play with magicals, or any shimmer powders really. And this panel, I may have actually shown this in my video from several weeks ago. This was just a plain panel of watercolor paper, and then I just, actually part of it was from mopping up excess magicals from some other panels that I had made, and now I was just adding more to it to get the really cool backgrounds. All right, the sentiment that I'm using is from the Wreath Building Feathers. It's a really cool stamp set, and I use the You Are Magical sentiment, and I just heat emboss that right onto my shimmery background. And now I have Scor-Tape on the back to adhere it to my card base. And now you can see these feathers are dry. I did spray them with a sealer, and you can see all the dimension. And to glue them down, I'm just going to go right down the center of the feather. There's kind of a line, sorry for my voice again, there's kind of a line to follow that follows the form of the feather, and that's the only part that I'm putting glue on because I want the rest of it to stay up and just have all that dimension. And I'll show you in a few seconds all that dimension. So these are all glued down, and it just gives so much movement to these feathers. So I'm really, really happy that I decided to use magicals with these. And then I did add some sequins. Picket Fence has some really awesome sequins. All right, here's the Floating Dreams stamp. This is another new product this month. And you can see I'm preparing some paper with some anti-static powder because I will be embossing this image. I'm using VersaMark, and this is watercolor paper, so I'm only going to show you stamping it once, but I did stamp it 3 times just because it's watercolor paper, so it has some grooves in it. and a MISTI always helps because you can stamp it multiple times and it won't move. So now I'm using white embossing powder, and once I am done adding all the embossing powder, then I can heat set it with my heat tool. And so this is, I think I mentioned in my last video with the Magicals, doing an emboss resist technique with the Magicals is kind of how I first started using shimmer powders. So I've put my panel in my little plastic bin, and I'm just going to sprinkle on a couple colors of the Magicals, and I'm only going to use these 2 colors. And look at that. Isn't that amazing? Just spritzing the water, and it's, I mean, there's a reason they call it Magicals, right? So I zoomed in so you can see the bubbles of color on top of where the image was embossed. And that happens with shimmer powders. It kind of just bubbles up, and that's why I'm taking a little paper towel and blotting up some of that color, because I really want the color to be around the image, not on top of the embossed image. So I'm just carefully trying to mop up those bubbles without mopping up any of the color around the image. And I just think this is so cool. Now, I did not end up using this panel yet. This is in my stash, ready to go for a day that I'm just inspired to make something. I love putting stuff into my stash for a rainy day. Now, here is a card that I actually did make with the Floating Dreams stamp, and I made this differently. I actually created the panel first with Magicals. I just took a blank piece of watercolor paper, added a couple colors of Magicals, and spritzed it. Then when it was dry, then I heat embossed the stamp, and I used the Satin Pearl embossing powder, so you can see it's very shimmery but very subtle. And I also made a couple more of those feathers using the Magicals, and I got that wonderful dimension to those feathers. And the colors that I used for this card are I believe it's Haviscone Heather and Pemberley Pride Purple. So it just made this really beautiful background, and the feathers. Now the sentiment comes from another new stamp set, and the oval die as well. I'll have links to the products below, but for that sentiment stamp, I'm going to show you where that came from. This is Home for the Bees. This is another new set. And there's these little fairies that are part of this set. It's just really magical. And again, I don't have the process for this card, but I just stamped it, colored it with my alcohol markers. I believe I used a combination of my Olo and Copic markers. And I just think this image is so sweet. And I put the little fairies on there as well. All right, so one more thing I want to mention. This is part of an Instagram hop, or I am part of an Instagram hop today. And you could win a $50 gift card to Picket Fence Studios. So I'm going to link to my Instagram page below. Definitely click on there to go hop along. And I believe you need to participate by the end of the day, March 17th. This is 2024. So if you're watching this in a timely fashion, you could participate. I really appreciate you visiting my YouTube channel today. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. I appreciate you being here. Thanks. Bye-bye.